Welcome into the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Pod. Nick Whalen and Brandon Kravitz here with you as we've been every Wednesday, Brandon, for the last, 10, 11 months. It's been a lot of fun doing this all year with you. We are near the end of the conference semifinals. We will discuss both games from last night. New York bouncing back in a big way, blowing out the Pacers at home. Denver, they've now won 3 straight in their series. They hold a 3-2 lead over the Timberwolves. We got 2 more games on the slate tonight. Cleveland going to take one last shot, I think, at the Boston Celtics tonight. Last time I checked, Brandon, the Cavs are 15-point dogs on the road tonight. So we'll discuss what we think might happen there. And then a really fun Game 5 between the Mavs and the Thunder. But some housekeeping, first and foremost. We are brought to you by one of our favorite sites, one of our favorite partners, Prize Picks. It's the best way to get action in on sports in more than 30 states across the country, including my home state of Wisconsin. And it's really simple to play. I could go make my picks every night, submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. I'll tell you, I take a lot more than 60 seconds. You could do it. You could probably do it in like 10 seconds if you really want. But we put a lot of research into this. We use RotoWire picks to kind of compare, contrast everything before we throw in any projections. But all you really have to do is just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats, and you can watch the winnings roll in. What are we looking at tonight, Brandon? You've been the Prize Picks guru for us throughout the season. I know you have a video up, which you can find at the RotoWire and RotoWire NBA Twitter accounts. What are your favorite Prize Picks projections for Wednesday night?
Yeah, sometimes I feel like I would do better if I just picked these in 10 seconds, but we like you said, we put the research in. Chet Holmgren has been a defensive load. He has really shined in the playoffs so far on that end and has been a sterling addition to the Oklahoma City Thunder. He's had 4 blocks in back-to-back games. He's got 4 steals overall over the course of this series against Dallas, so no reason to start fading him now. I like him for more than 3.5 stocks, steals, plus blocks. Ooh. Pairing that with a Luka fade. I tried to buy some regression a couple of games ago with Luka. It's just not coming. He has really struggled to shoot the ball from deep throughout the postseason. 22% from 3 in Game 4, 25% in Game 3. Go back a series, he shot 24% against the Clippers, and it gets to a point where his volume isn't there because his confidence isn't there. So the old saying is shooters shoot. I think Luka ought to shut that down and just see if he can make hay in the paint. So I'm taking him for less than 2.5 made threes, which is probably a bet that I have never made. But it just he's not a reliable 3-point shooter right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll talk more about that game later in the show. I mean, just kind of a really strange Game 4 for both Luka and Kyrie for some reasons that are obvious as far as, what OKC was doing to Kyrie. But yeah, the whole playoffs, Luka is just not – he hasn't really been in peak form. And obviously he's banged up, but even despite that, it's typically somebody who plays through these ailments, and he just has not looked like himself. The Holmgren number, that's high, 3.5. That's usually one that I would back away from. But he's hit the more in 5 of 8 playoff games, even going back to round 1 against the Pelicans, where he had a 4-block game, he had a 5-block game, 1 against the Pels. And like you said, he's got 10 steals and blocks over the last 2 games alone. So I like those calls. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, a huge selection of players and stat types. That's what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. We got WNBA action tonight as well, by the way. If you want to mix and match, you don't just have to, throw in an NBA entry. You can throw in some WNBA. I know they were running a promo last night. All you needed was Caitlin Clark to score at least 1 point, which she did. I don't know if they had a Caitlin Clark turnovers projection going. She had 10 of those in her debut for the Fever last night, but you could go check that out. Prize Picks is rolling out a bunch of WNBA projections every night. There are games. And the best part of all this, Brandon, is if you go download the Prize Picks app, or you just go to prizepicks.com, when you go to deposit, put in the code ROTOPOD, ROTOPOD. That'll get you a first deposit match up to $100. That's ROTOPOD, ROTOPOD. First deposit match up to $100 on Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right, let's dive in to last night's games. We will talk a bit about the ongoing 24-25 fantasy mock draft that Alex and I are participating in. Didn't have a chance to talk about that on Monday, so I want to give some updates there because at the end of the day, this is a fantasy basketball pod. But let's start with the early game yesterday. This was Pacers-Knicks. Brandon, I was streaming most of this game on my phone while I was trying to replace a light switch at my house. So it's like I'm flipping the power on and off. The Wi-Fi is going crazy. It's resetting left and right. I had to watch most of the first half from an Ace Hardware where I was doing some shopping. So I was all over the map, but we watched the whole game. I got to be honest, last night was one of the it's like I was wrong about everything. I was wrong about everything. We did the RotoWire NBA show last night. Alex and I are like, yeah, it feels like the Knicks are out of gas. I think this is a Pacers spot. I really liked Tyrese Halliburton, who had played well and had been really aggressive over the last few games. He was back to passive Tyrese Halliburton last night, just 1 of 4 from beyond the arc, only took 9 shots total. And this was kind of a complete reversal of what we saw in game 4. The Knicks didn't jump on the Pacers quite to the same degree that Indiana did, where it felt like that game was over like 6 minutes in, but Pacers got off to a good start. And then there was a huge Knicks rally at the end of the first. They put up 38 in the first quarter. And really from then on, it was off to the races. The Pacers made a couple of runs. They got it down to 10, 11 a couple of times. But this was a huge night for Jalen Brunson. I love the move by Tibbs to put Miles McBride in the starting lineup, a guy with fresh legs, a guy who they have to respect as a shooter. I think that was the bigger thing. It's like, yeah, you could say McBride, he's not one of those guys who's been playing 44 minutes every night, but having him out there to start this game instead of Precious Achiuwa, I think that made it really difficult on Indiana to kind of hone in on Jalen Brunson as much as they wanted to.
Yeah, I think the Pacers were about as locked in on this game as you were last night being at Ace Hardware. I don't know what is going on. This team is so night and day in their home arena and then playing at MSG. And it really all starts with Tyrese Halliburton. He's just not been good in that arena. 5 of 9 from the field, 1 of 4 from 3-point range. He's not aggressive, hasn't been all that efficient. The assists, like how does Tyrese Halliburton, one of the best passers in the league, end a game with 5 assists? Jalen Brunson was just cooking him. He was cooking Tyrese Halliburton. Andrew Nembhard was the butt of everybody's jokes on social media last night. And then you look at the points in the paint. Like you have Miles Turner, you have Pascal Siakam. You ought to be able to stop somebody. 62-36. And Isaiah Hartenstein, my God, was he good last night. 12 offensive rebounds. It was just like every energy and effort play went the Knicks side. You saw another great performance from Josh Hart. I still think the Knicks are out of gas. I just think they had, because that's a scrappy group and they had MSG behind them, they were able to put one more together. I'm just not buying that this is now that the Knicks can overcome the minutes, the injuries, like all of that stuff doesn't just go away. The Pacers had a really bad performance, but I fully expect them to bounce back. The question for me is, what does Game 7 look like? Because the Pacers haven't proven that they can do anything in that arena.
So we're assuming there's a Game 7.
I'm assuming there's a Game 7. Yeah,
okay.
You got to be on Indiana in Game 6.
Well, the nice thing for the New York Knicks is they finally get a 2-day break in this series. So Game 6 is not until Friday, which I do think bodes well for New York.
Yeah.
And I'm still... basically every time in this series that I've said, all right, I think it's time to fade the Knicks. I think they're out of gas. Then they have a performance like this. And, for they did not look like the team that's been playing all their guys 48 minutes a night, right? I mean, the energy and the effort, and like you said, the MSG crowd certainly helps. I can't remember if it was Carlisle or Halliburton said after the game, something about, when the Knicks get an offensive rebound, it's almost like it kind of juices the crowd up, right? And you felt that, especially with Hartenstein, some of the second chance points that he was able to generate. I mean, the Pacers, for their part, they only had 5 offensive boards on the entire night. They were out-rebounded on the offensive glass 20-5, 53-29 overall. And you look at the number of shots, the Knicks took 101 shots last night compared to 72 for the Indiana Pacers. I mean, that is about as big of a discrepancy as you're going to see in any game, regular season or playoffs. Knicks also got contributions from Alec Burks, who, as we recall, was completely mothballed earlier in these playoffs. They're really only playing him because they absolutely have to, with the absence of OG Anunoby. But I thought he gave them a huge boost. 5 threes off the bench for Alec Burks. They didn't really get a whole lot from Precious Achiuwa, who was solid on the defensive end. 2 blocks, 2 steals for him last night. But they're running a 7-man rotation right now, and they still lean extremely heavily on Brunson, McBride, Hart, and DiVincenzo. It's another good game for Josh Hart. He had 18 and 11. Dante, that was one of the props Alex and I liked last night as well. Continuing with this theme of me just betting both of these games completely horribly. DiVincenzo had some huge impact plays in this game.
Yeah,
he was 4 of 14 from the field. He was 0 of 6 from 3, and a lot of those were wide open.
I was on. That was one of the props that I handed out yesterday. Yeah. Over 3.5 made threes.
Yeah.
just wasn't there. I actually thought he played well. Like when I was watching DiVincenzo, I thought his approach was great. He thought he played with energy and effort. Like, he looked like a Nick out there, but
Yeah.
the scoring punch just wasn't there last night.
So that's one thing that I think if you're in New York looking ahead to Game 6, you say, okay, we obviously out efforted the Pacers, we out energied the Pacers. We also didn't shoot the ball that well. This was not for a game that you win by 30 in this spot. It's not like the Knicks shot the lights out by any means. Other than Alec Burks, and obviously Jalen Brunson played well, but it's not like he was lighting it up from three. I mean, they went 12 of 35 from beyond the arc. Pacers went 12 of 27. They technically shot the ball better from three percentage wise. Pacers got to the line more. Obviously Pacers started over 18 times, which is probably not going to happen in Game 6 either. But this was not a complete run them out of the gym type of game in terms of shooting for the Knicks. So I think that's the one thing you can look at and you say, all right, maybe even if we can't quite match that energy level on the road in Game 6, we can hopefully expect to shoot the ball a little bit better. I'm not just handing this one to Indy in Game 6. I do think it's more likely than not that we get a Game 7, and I'm hoping for that as a neutral party in this series. I would love a Game 7 at Madison Square Garden. The Knicks a chance to get to the conference finals for the first time in like almost 25 years. I think it was 2000 was the last time they were in this spot. Pacers are 5-point favorites at home for Game 6. Does that seem about right to you?
It does, but I actually don't think that's the best way to bet this series. I think and I've already put my money where my mouth is here, so I'm not just saying this to say it. I think the Pacers win Game 6. But if they win Game 6, and we're saying that part of the reason is the Knicks are out of gas, the Knicks don't have the bodies, this is dependent on OG Anunoby not coming back in this series.
I don't think he's coming back. Chris Haynes said during the game that it's highly unlikely he's coming back in this series.
Because that would change my opinion. I think he's such an impact for what he's a matchup problem for Indiana. But I think the way to bet this series is Indiana plus 210 to win the series. So rather than just taking them and having to worry about the point differential in Game 6, if you think they're going to win Game 6, and part of the reason you would think that is the Knicks are out of bodies and out of gas, well, that's not going to change in 2 days in Game 7, and then cross your fingers, and all you need is Indiana to show up, and you're sitting on a plus 210 ticket for them to win, which is certainly not the price you're going to get on the money line. Look at what the odds were last night. They were plus 1.5 as far as the point spread goes. So I think there's more inherent value in taking Indiana to just win the series. Am I overthinking this?
No, I don't think you're overthinking it at all. I think you're kind of making the assumption, of course, that they win Game 6, and I think I'm a little less keen on that than you are, but I think value-wise, and it's at 215 actually right now at DraftKings, so you're getting even a little bit better value if you shop around a bit. I also don't mind betting the Knicks to win the series in 7, which you can get at plus money too. I mean, that's plus 155. So really, it depends, I think, on what you think the chances are of Indy going in and winning that Game 7. Maybe you just bet them both. Bet them both. Put $100 on the Knicks plus 155, the Pacers, plus 215, and you're in for $200, but you're cashing out 255 if the Knicks win. You're cashing out 315 if the Pacers win. Obviously, the only thing that burns you in that scenario would be the Knicks winning Game 6 on the road.
Right. Yeah. So there's probably a way. I think if you're going to do this, you just bet the Pacers to win the series. And then if what you see, let's say the Pacers obviously have to win in Game 6. But if they do that, then you can sit there on Sunday and go, okay, do I want to hedge out of this? And you'll have that opportunity because it's going to be a tight point spread on Sunday. The Knicks will probably be favored by no more than 2 points. So if you want out of that, you can still do it. What I want is I just want to get in on the Pacers at a really good price. And then if I need to back out of it, because they're really close together in terms of the way the odds makers view them, there is a way to get out of that bet by Sunday. You just need them to win. What I'm doing it here is I want to bet the Pacers. I just don't want to bet the Pacers -5. So how can I do that? And I think this is a way to do it.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I'm trying to get you a money line price, which probably won't be all that appealing. -205 on the Pacers money line for Friday. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for the minimal return you get on that for whatever your unit size is, I think you're better off taking the Pacers in the series and then hedging out if you feel uncomfortable with it by the time you get to Sunday. because then you could take the Knicks. The Knicks last night were minus, by the time the game tipped off, they were minus 120 on the money line. So if you really just feel uncomfortable with your bet at plus 210, just bet the Knicks on the money line by the time you get to Sunday.
Yeah, I think the lesson here is just put in as many bets as you can, right? Just
I mean, that's really, isn't that essentially what we're saying? Just bet this 17 different ways so that you can profit $7.
Yes, exactly. No matter what, you'll come away with a winning ticket, even if you're in the red.
But I do think if you get a little creative here, you can guarantee yourself at least a minimal profit. You know, or you can just take the Pacers -5, just avoid all of this.
We do have an arbitrage calculator over at RotoWire, by the way, so go check that out. Not something I do very often, but I know we have the tools. So if you want to play around with that, feel free. Let's hit the late game last night. What a reversal in this series, Brandon. We were coordinating Anthony Edwards. He's the next Michael Jordan. I don't know if you've heard. We were coordinating the Timberwolves. We're starting to look ahead of like, man, how did the Timberwolves match? Little did we know that the Denver Nuggets would show their championship medal and rally back now with 3 straight convincing wins in this series. 3 very different wins. Game 3 was kind of an avalanche for Denver. Game 4, was an 8-point game and one that Denver controlled throughout, but that was a hard-fought win for the Nuggets. And Game 5, it didn't necessarily run away with it, but again, they were in control for what felt like the entire game. I do think Minnesota, they really missed Mike Conley in this game. I don't know that Conley playing necessarily swings the result, but you just kind of felt, with Anthony Edwards having a down game, having a quiet night offensively, the Nuggets, I thought, actually kind of took a page out of the OKC playbook and were really aggressive in doubling Anthony Edwards, forcing the ball out of his hands. You're daring guys like Jaden McDaniels and Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Naz Reid to beat you. And Nah had a pretty solid game. Played almost 40 minutes. He hit 4 threes, did make them pay at times, but Minnesota just kind of felt like they were one guy short to me offensively, and that was with getting a pretty decent game out of Karl-Anthony Towns, who is it's just you kind of spin the wheel on Towns at this point. You have no idea what he's going to give you game to game. But I thought Cat was actually a big part of the reason that this was still a relatively close game throughout.
Yeah, I mean, the Minnesota Timberwolves, they pack a punch. They can hit you in more than one way. And clearly Denver sold out on Anthony Edwards. They were throwing bodies at him left and right. They wanted to get the ball out of his hands. I do think it hurt tremendously not having Mike Conley out there, because Anthony Edwards was more of a ball handler and less of a run free and stress the defense with, backdoor cuts and things like that. And you saw that affected him. He had 4 turnovers, only scored 18 points. I think what I've learned more than anything else, I think any halfway savvy NBA fan already knew that Anthony Edwards wasn't Michael Jordan. I didn't need 3 losses in a row to learn that. But the lack of confidence in Nikola Jokic after 2 losses, in thinking that, oh, well, this is what we kind of thought all along. Nice little run this guy had with a couple of MVPs and a finals run, but he doesn't really want it that bad. We just cannot wait to doubt this guy and the mettle that he has as a competitor, the savvy that he has as a basketball player. We're seeing that on full display. I think the Denver Nuggets were shocked at how athletic and physical the Minnesota Timberwolves are compared to the team they just faced. The Lakers are kind of old and slow. Minnesota is not that. And I think it took Denver by surprise a little bit. But Denver settled in. They are the defending champions. We're seeing that on full display. They're the smarter team with the best player, undoubtedly. Nikola Jokic didn't just cook last night. He cooked against the defensive player of the year. I mean, it was like Rudy Gobert could have been just pick your average center in the NBA. That's who he was last night. He had no impact on Jokic whatsoever. 0 turnovers and 40 points and 7 rebounds. That is insane. So props to Jokic. You should never be doubted.
I'm not one historically to defend Rudy Gobert, but I don't know what else he could have done. I mean, these were pretty difficult looks. It reminded me a lot of some of the conversation around Anthony Davis in round 1 and even the conference finals last year, where it's like, man, AD should be the guy that can stop Jokic. It's like, well, sometimes you just got to tip your cap, man. And I think Jokic is now, Jokic has pretty firmly established himself as the guy, right? Not that there was any debate. He's won 3 of the last 4 MVPs for a reason, but I still think there was some Jokic, Embiid, Giannis. You can even throw Luka or SGA or Tatum or whoever you want in that conversation. This was one of those reminder games that it's like he's on even a slightly higher level than those guys who. When Giannis was at his absolute peak 3-4 years ago, I think we were saying the same thing. But I think Jokic is on an even higher level than that. And who knows, maybe Giannis stays healthy next year and makes that a debate again, because obviously what he does, I think defensively, Jokic can't really match. But the third quarter for Jokic is an all-time quarter. It's not often you think of like a full quarter when you're talking about a performance, but this was unreal, man. 16 in the third for Jokic, 6 of 7 from the field, 4 of 4 at the line. Of course, tacked on 3 rebounds and 4 assists as well. I mean, the degree of difficulty on some of these looks, the swooping like underhand scoop shot that he hit over Gobert. It's like I don't really pin this on Rudy. I obviously you'd expect a little bit more perhaps out of what is he now, 4-time defensive player of the year, but this was just one of those games where I don't think there's a single player in the NBA who could have really done anything to bother Nikola Jokic. And you mentioned the no turnovers for Jokic too, which it's not like he's an extremely high turnover player, but he had been earlier in the series. That was something that plagued him early on. He had 7 turnovers in game 1. I think he had 4 in game 2. That is kind of the one area I think if you want to pick nits with Jokic is he'd been a little bit reckless early in the series. And, not only did he have his best offensive game of the series by a mile, but it was his cleanest game overall as well.
Jokic just isn't bothered by size. And I think that's one of the things that throws us off as evaluators is that you figure that the more size and length you throw at Jokic, the better off you are. But his shot is so unorthodox and so high arcing that size doesn't really impact him. And his sight, his vision towards his teammates, obviously with his passing, is unlike anything I've ever seen. I mean, it's like Steve Nash levels in a 7-footer, but his vision to the basket, he's just the guy. It's like he has x-ray vision. He just sees through people. Throwing a smaller, more athletic forward at him seems to be the only thing that works. But I think it was Jaden McDaniels last night that was in foul trouble early on, and they had to throw Rudy Gobert at him, and he just doesn't really care about the defensive advantage that Gobert has against most bigs in the NBA. Just doesn't impact Jokic. It's a terrible matchup. You're right. This is not an anti-Gobert thing. Nobody really could have stopped Jokic last night. Great offense in the NBA. That's been like this my whole life, and it's more like it today than it's ever been. Great offense is always going to be good defense. There was nobody slowing Jokic down last night.
Yeah, Aaron Gordon continues to play really well for the Nuggets. I think that's been, part of the reason for this turnaround. Another big offensive game for him last night, 18 points, 10 boards, 5 assists, and a steal for Aaron Gordon. And that's kind of helped offset Michael Porter just not really doing much over these last 2 games, especially, 2 of 7 for 3 from him last night. He was 0 of 2 from 3 with just 4 points in game 4. And, I think in the first round against the Lakers, Michael Porter was, in my opinion, their second best player for much of that series. Obviously Jamal Murray hit some big shots, but it wasn't a huge series overall for Murray. I thought Porter was a bigger part of the reason they won that. But Aaron Gordon was fairly quiet in round 1, and he's had a huge reversal. He's been massive for them. KCP 4 or 5 from 3 last night, hit some big ones to kind of stave off some runs by the Timberwolves. They got 10 points out of Christian Brown off the bench as well. What's the fix here for Minnesota in game 6? I know that's a very broad and difficult question to answer. Timberwolves are 2-point favorites. This is a very similar line to what we saw for the Knicks, who I believe closed as 1.5-point favorites last night over the Pacers.
Well, I think they need Mike Conley back so that Anthony Edwards can settle back into his more traditional role in the offense. Yep. And he's got to go wild. I think this has to be an Anthony Edwards game where he's matching Jokic. There's nothing I could say. If Chris Finch can't figure it out, I'm certainly not going to be able to do it. Jokic, there's no slowing Jokic down. You kind of hope that you can throw enough physicality at him where you're not getting in foul trouble with your bigs and just make him a little uncomfortable. But honestly, that might not even work. It has to be an Anthony Edwards game. He's got to go nuts. He's got to be at around 40 points, a blistering percentage from 3. I think that's their best chance. Crowd behind you. Ant-Man with the highlight dunks, keeping the crowd into it. Those kind of things I think will help. But we're at the stage in the series. You get to game 6, game 7. It's a lot less about the role guys. It becomes much more about the stars. I think he's got to take over if they have a chance. But my early lean on this would be Denver. I already took them after they lost game 1. I took them to win the series at plus 105, thinking I was a genius. I feel a lot better about it now, obviously. But after game 2, I thought, well, this ticket is dead. And the Denver Nuggets, as somebody mentioned in the comments, has risen like the Undertaker. So I'm probably not. We're going to lay off of the game just because I already have Denver to win the series anyway. So there's no point to double down on that. But I would probably be on the Nuggets.
Yeah, Nuggets money line right now plus 110 at DraftKings. Anthony Edwards points prop, by the way, is 28.5. I actually liked Edwards over 29.5 last night.
I'll take that.
And that did not go well. But I just there's no way in a true do or die. You can't really simulate. You lose this game, your season's over. In a true do or die situation, Anthony Edwards is not taking 15 shots. I don't believe that that's happening again. So I like the over there as well. I think you gotta have to go down swinging, even if Mike Conley isn't out there and that hamstrings them a little bit. Looking at updated title odds right now, Brandon, we still have Boston minus 130, which is a pretty wild price for midway through round 2, but it makes sense, right? I mean, they're going to win their series against the Cavs. They're going to have a pretty nice matchup against whether it's Indy or the banged up Knicks. I think you like Boston there. Denver right now plus 275, OKC 8-1, Dallas 13-1. If you're really feeling saucy, you can get the Timberwolves at 16-1, the Knicks 20-1, Pacers 75-1. Is there any action there that stands out to you?
I mean, if the Knicks weren't banged up, I think that would be a fun bet to make. But I think at this point, the only one that I think is worth taking a stab at would be Oklahoma City. At 8 to, there's still value there at 8-1. Denver at plus 260, not really a bet I'm trying to make. Boston at minus 135. If you haven't taken Boston by now, certainly don't want to do it today.
That ship has sailed.
Yeah, that ship has definitely sailed. I mean, if you believe Minnesota is not dead yet, them at 16-1 is they have the talent. They have the talent and the coaching to win a championship with this roster, but they got to get past Denver to do it. So maybe if you're a Minnesota believer, that's not a bad bet to make. I think they're going to lose the series, so I'm going to lay off of that, but that's an interesting one. I don't think Dallas has a shot. Luka, if they win this series, it'll feel like a miracle at this point. Luka is uneven. I don't think he'll get past whoever they play in the next. So I would say OKC, Minnesota, and if you really hate your money, bet on the Knicks. That would be about all I have.
This also might be the best price you get on Denver for a while too. If you're a Denver believer, getting them at close to 3-1, I don't think that's horrible. There's a lot of these where you're like, man, it's so tough to bet something that was significantly more valuable, a week or in this case, months ago. But you can't really go back in time. So I think Denver plus 275 if you think they can get through. Which I think if Denver wins this series, I think they'll be at a pretty big advantage against either OKC or Dallas. I think this will be their toughest series through the West. And I just, I really like OKC a lot. I love this team. I don't think they much of a challenge to Denver, to be honest. I think they can give them a run. I think that's probably a 5-game series for the Nuggets if that's what it ends up being.
So obviously the return on that is a whole lot more appealing for Denver to win the championship. But in that scenario, you need them to get past the Boston Celtics, which is tough. They can do it, but that'll be a tough hill to climb. Minus 125 right now for the Denver Nuggets to win the West. That almost feels like
I like that.
Like a half lock at this point. Can you call something a half lock?
Yeah, maybe take a plus 110 on the money line and then take that to win the West. I don't mind that at all. Let's talk a little bit about tonight's games. I want to spend like 2 minutes on Cavs Celtics. It is what it is, man. It's spirited run by the Cavs. I thought they played about as well as they could have given the circumstances in Game 4. For that to be a 2-possession game, with under 2 minutes left, without Donovan Mitchell, without Jared Allen, with just kind of getting shaky performances all around from everybody other than Max Strus. Maybe it says more about Boston and this, kind of lack of a killer instinct that seems like the one concern for this team. But Darius Garland, nice performance by him. Good second half for Darius Garland. He finished with 30. Evan Mobley's shown some more signs throughout this series, but Karis LeVert, 1 of 8 from three. Isaac Okoro, 1 of 8 from the field. They really didn't get anything from that bench. That was a winnable game for the Cavs. I think we see this every year. We've seen this over, decades watching the NBA, Brandon. It's like when a team puts forth that kind of effort in that spot and then they come up short, the letdown game is what usually comes next. And I think there's a good reason why the Boston Celtics are 14.5-point favorites tonight for game 5. I think this is a Cavs funeral, in my opinion.
So have we gotten word on Donovan Mitchell yet?
No. Mitchell, LeVert, Allen, all questionable. Craig Porter, also questionable for the Cavs, according to RotoWire. Not sure that one matters. But no, we have no confirmation on any of those three so far.
Would you recommend, because my first instinct is to, if you want to bet this game, is to wait on Donovan Mitchell, because if he does play, he's worth about 3 points to the spread.
Yeah.
So this line's going to shift to like 12.5 if Donovan Mitchell's out there. I don't know if I want to buy it at 15, but if he doesn't play, then yeah, I agree. This is a 20-point win for the Celtics.
Yeah, I mean, it's
that's the risk.
Right, like the Donovan Mitchell's played 3 games, of course, in the series. One of them was the win in game 2. The other they lost by 25, and the other they lost by 13. So, that I think that 12.5 number, maybe it gets down to even 11.5. It's still kind of right on the borderline for me. I'm probably just going to stay away from the number. Probably stay away from this game altogether. I actually haven't been betting Celtics games really at all because there's so much blowout risk. And this goes back to round 1 against Miami. It's like I don't feel comfortable recommending Celtics player props when you have no idea if it's going to be a relatively close game or if the starters are going to be out at the end of the third quarter. But this just continues what I think we will look back on as an all-time easy march to the finals for the Celtics, and nothing against them. I mean, they've built an incredible roster. They've done it the right way. This isn't, adding Kevin Durant to the Warriors where there's some spite involved. Like they've built the best team. They've played the teams that are in front of them. They had timely injuries for, Joel Embiid and Giannis and Lillard. It's just kind of how it's broken. But I mean, this is just it's turning into a cakewalk, I think, for the Celtics. And, the Knicks, the Pacers, those teams, I think they'll give them a run, but the talent gap that Boston has, over really all these remaining teams in the East is about as stark as you're going to see.
I think they'll get a tough matchup from almost anybody they face in the West. Yeah. OKC, Minnesota, Denver. I think that'll be a really good series. Any one of those. Sure. But yeah, the East, it already feels like it's a complete wrap. If you want to bet the Cavs, I'm with you. I think the blowout risk is too high to even if Donovan Mitchell doesn't play and this balloons up to 16.5 or whatever, I still wouldn't play the Cleveland Cavaliers. But their first half at plus 8.5, not bad. I could see them hanging around. This is still a team that has talent and has their backs against the wall. I could see them putting together a good half of basketball. I just can't see them putting together a full game where they're able to hang with Boston. So if you want to bet the Cavs, I would get out by halftime.
Yeah, I think that's a sharp take. All right, let's talk Thunder Mavs. This feels like it should be 3-1 Mavs, Brandon. I'll tell you, the Mavs, they again, very weird game 4, low scoring game 4. OKC only had 43 at the half. They only put up 22 in the third, and then a 35-point onslaught by the Thunder in the fourth quarter. That was, of course, led by Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. That was, I think, before last night, one of the most impressive quarters that we've seen from anyone in the playoffs, and then Jokic topped it. But the degree of difficulty on some of those looks by SGA, who was just giving them bucket after bucket after bucket in huge spots in the fourth quarter, this was very, very close to being 3-1 and feeling like it was probably going to be over in favor of the Mavs. And all of a sudden, now it feels like maybe OKC has the advantage with a banged up Luka Doncic, a passive, being double teamed every single night. Kyrie Irving, he's kind of been forced into almost more of a traditional point guard role, which you don't really think of with Kyrie Irving. I have no idea what to expect the rest of the way here, but the series line to me is interesting for a 2-2 series. And yes, OKC, they'll get 2 of the next 3 at home. If it goes 7, minus 160 to win the series are the Thunder.
Wow. They were plus 180 before game 4 to win the
series. That's a huge swing. Huge.
And I think game 4 taught us a lot. I was worried going into that game that the age of OKC was finally starting to show itself and the experience that Dallas has. I don't think Dallas is as talented as OKC, but they do have more veteran savvy, and that kind of stuff does matter at this time of year. Wasn't a factor. OKC was not phased. They played really well defensively. They got to the free throw line, or they made more free throws, and that was the biggest thing. They both shot. Okay, so Dallas had 23 attempts, and OKC had 24. But Dallas missed 11 free throws at home in a pressure situation in the playoffs, and OKC missed one. That to me screams a team that doesn't feel like they're in over their skis here. So a lot of confidence with that one. You go back to OKC, they win tonight, and it does feel like it's over. They'll have 2 more chances to get it done. So I think the line is right because you figure they win tonight, and once they do that, it kind of feels like Dallas's fate is sealed.
I'm not backing off the Mavs. I mean,
you're still on Dallas.
I'm still on Dallas, man. I am. I think we're actually getting a good price here, plus 135 for them to win the series. I'm just wary of writing off a team that I think is capable of having the 2 best players in the series on any given night. And the question is, do we trust Jason Kidd to make the requisite adjustments? I think we got to keep in mind, OKC to me stole that game. They stole that game, and I know it's huge for momentum and kind of backing yourself off the ropes to have this be 2-2 and not 3-1. But Dallas, defensively played one of its best games of the whole playoffs and maybe even the whole season for like 3 1/3 quarters before they let SGA get loose midway through the fourth. I mean, they were completely shutting down OKC early on. For the most part, they've done a pretty good job on Jalen Williams, who was fantastic in round 1. He was bad the other night, 5 of 19 from the field. They're daring Lou Dort to shoot. For the most part, you can live with those results. They've basically played Josh Giddey off the floor. Like a lot of things have gone right for the Mavs in this series defensively. You can't expect to win too many playoff games when you're getting 27 combined points out of Kyrie and Luka. So I think Kyrie needs to be more aggressive attacking the doubles. He had one possession, I think it was early in the fourth, when they brought the double. He kind of gave a classic kind of Kyrie hesitation in and out, went right around the second defender, got to the rim. But early he was kind of okay, just settling for passing out of it, which is the right basketball play. And when PJ Washington is hitting 5 threes a night, it ends up looking okay. But Kyrie Irving can't take 11 shots. I think he took 14 in the previous games. Like he needs to be more involved, even if he's forcing things, even if he's taking what NBA.com/stats would define as extremely contested shots. I still think you want Kyrie Irving doing that. Like that, he's the guy that makes the contested shots. It's a better result to me than kind of putting your fate in the hands of Dante Exum and Josh Green and Derek Jones, trying to hit open jumpers. So I do wonder, do we finally get the more aggressive version of Kyrie Irving? Just seeing 9 points in the box score for him in a playoff game is so jarring. The other question is Luka's health, right? And can Luka actually stay engaged in the game and not, turn this into just like a 48-minute conversation with the referees, which is getting completely out of hand, man. And look, he's not the only guy, right? Like pretty much every superstar in the NBA at this point is kind of a foul baiter, somebody who's going to be going at the refs. But Luka's taken this to an extreme level, man, to the point where it's easy for us to say, but I really do think it's affecting his play on the court. Like his number one priority is getting on the refs and drawing fouls as opposed to playing basketball. Like it shows through on TV.
Well, I mean, in a game that is predicated on speed, and OKC has no problem pushing the pace, if you take 2 seconds to talk to the ref about how you don't like the call they didn't just make, well, that's 2 extra seconds that you're not getting back on defense.
Right.
It drives coaches crazy for everybody. And Luka feels like he can get away with it because he's so valuable to the Mavs, and he is. But this is the problem: is you have Luka the complainer. You have Luka who appears to be hampered. He's struggling around the rim. He's struggling from 3-point range. So, and he's not a great defender to begin with. Once you start stacking all of those things up, and now all of a sudden, I actually don't really like an overly aggressive Kyrie for this team, but you're right. Right now, they need that because Luka's not 100%. So you're getting a passive Kyrie, less than 100% and whining Luka Doncic, and a team that is not as good defensively as their opposition. There's just no reason for me to look at Dallas and say that's a winning group right now. They'll have to go out tonight and prove me wrong. I've got no faith in this team for the rest of the series.
All right, Mavs +4 tonight. You can get them on the money line at +145. I might be throwing a little sprinkle on that. I'm not writing off the Mavs. I'm not writing off the Mavs. I mean that
Do it. You got
I
to be
feel like
on
that
them tonight then,
I will
obviously.
be on them tonight. I will. I think they can steal this. I think they can bounce back. I think they put forth like an all-time good defensive game for most of Monday night, but offensively, I think they have a long way to go here. I mean, I think there's progression coming for a team that shot 40% from the field and had some bad turnovers. And you mentioned the free throws too. I mean, that's a great point by you. 9 of 19 in the second half at the free throw line. It's like you just hit like 3
Can't
of
do
those at
that.
any point, you probably win this game. I mean, Luka. I mean, the biggest one obviously was Luka missing the front end after that very questionable foul on Lou Dort late in the game that in all likelihood would have sent it to overtime.
Yeah, you can't leave points out there. In a 4-point game, you left 11 at the free throw line. That tells the story right there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. OKC, by the way, 12 of 25 from the field in the fourth quarter. SGA, 4 of 7 from the field, 4 assists, 3 rebounds, a steal, a block, and 2 of 2 at the line. Honestly, it felt like he had more than 10 in the fourth, but just an incredible close for SGA. All right, before we go, I want to talk about the early 2024-25 fantasy mock that Alex and I have been participating in. I know you have the board in front of you as well. We have like 2 more rounds to go, so we'll give a full update on this. We'll tweet it out, maybe put an article on the site when it is fully up. But a lot of interesting picks here, and I will say it's a slow draft. So I have made a couple of auto picks by accident because some of these guys are in Australia, which is like complete opposite time zone. So I'll like come on the clock at like 12:30 a.m. and then I think I have like 6 hours, and to be honest, I'm just sleeping during that time. So, would I have taken RJ Barrett or Malik Monk where I took them? Maybe not. But either way, I've made most of my picks, as have most people in this draft. And I'll give you my team real quickly, Brandon. I was picking 1-1, and as you know, I'm taking Victor Wembanyama in that spot. That was a
Right.
no-brainer.
Yeah, money
It's
where
a
your mouth
14
is.
team league, so I didn't pick again until 28, where I grabbed Jalen Brunson. We then got Jaren Jackson, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Dante DiVincenzo, Jabari Smith, Jalen Suggs, RJ Barrett, Malik Monk. Then I just took Ivica Zubac with my first pick in the 11th round, which I love getting Zubac shares. Like he always goes way too late. Every single year he goes like 20 picks later than he should. He gives you a crazy high floor. I don't want to sit here and just talk about my 11th round pick for the entire time, but we'll kind of go through and talk about some of the interesting values. One that really jumped out to me is LaMelo Ball went in the middle of the 3rd round. And I will say, I don't think this is representative of how it's going to go come August or September. I don't think you can count on getting LaMelo in the 3rd round of a 14-team league. But interesting nonetheless that a lot of people who basically do this for a living are staying away from LaMelo.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it feels like a lead boot on your roster. You can't get rid of him. He's not playing enough. So that might be, I think that'll be the range in leagues that aren't 14 teamers. That does feel like that'll kind of be the range that he goes in, because you look at the players that are going in front of him, and it's a lot of guys that you just have a lot more confidence. The Tyrese Maxey's, Alperen Şengün's of the world. I think in a smaller league, it's not that wild. I'm a little surprised you cannot quit Jaren Jackson Jr. You just can't get away from it.
I mean, getting him with the 29th pick, I was okay with that. I'm buying back in on Jaren Jackson, despite him burning me this year. I think this was a throwaway season for Memphis. This was one of the worst injury-plagued rosters I think we've ever seen and may ever see. I mean, literally everything went wrong, starting with the Steven Adams injury, before the season even began. And not having Steven Adams kind of forces Jaren Jackson into an uncomfortable role. Obviously, you lose Desmond Bane, you lose John Morant, you lose Marcus Smart. I don't think what we saw from Jaren Jackson last year was representative. And a big part of the reason that he was so disappointing is he was missing games at the end of the year. And if Memphis has their guys, they're at the very least going to be like in the play-in conversation, if not higher, right? This team was a 2 seed last season. And I think you could argue that they're, an even more complete roster now than they were at that time. So I actually think it's a buying opportunity on Jaren Jackson. I think people are going to be down on him relative to this season, but I think he could be the player that he was 2 seasons ago if this team stays just even relatively healthy compared to this past year.
And then the very next pick was James Harden, so I'm sure that was a tough call for you between those two. And then Jalen Williams, I'm seeing go pick 5 in round 3. So he's shot up the board. No surprise there. That was a value pick from last year. Trying to see if there's anything else that stands out. Zion is a 4th-round pick. Is that? I mean, that's just an injury fade because stat-wise, he should be drafted. I would draft him more in the LaMelo range. I don't know why he's going around later.
Yeah, again, there were some kind of strange picks, throughout this draft, but it is what it is. I think when you're doing a mock this early, you have a little bit more license to just kind of go with your guys, right? As opposed to really worry about playing this league out or anything like that. One thing that did stand out to me too, and this is something that Alex and I specifically have harped on a lot this year, is the thing that burned us most this year was investing in good players on bad teams who either underperformed or were kind of dragged down by the team just sucking, or late in the year you have to worry about, all right, is Lauri Markkanen going to be out there for the final 20 games of the year? We didn't see a whole lot of players on bad teams go early. Scotty Barnes went 13th, which I'm fine with. I think Barnes was kind of insulated from the Raptors struggles, and I don't know that they'll be a whole lot better, but they're not a complete bottom barrel team. Kate Cunningham didn't go until later in round 3. Markkanen went at the beginning of round 3. That was maybe a little bit early for me. But for the most part, we saw people kind of lean on more dependable commodities on teams that we think will be pretty decent next season. James Harden's another interesting one. He went with the 2nd pick in round 3, so 30th overall. We're getting to the point now with Harden age-wise where you have to worry about some sort of decline, but he ended up being one of the better bargains in fantasy this past year. I mean, I think I got him in one draft at close to pick 60. And this was when we thought, James Harden was going to gain 20 pounds and sit out. So people were just kind of crossing him off. But this year was just another reminder that you could put whoever you want around him. You could put him on whatever team, whatever's going on off the court. And even if he's not going to win you a championship, which he of course has never done, he's always going to be a very, very good fantasy player. So he's another guy that I'm going to kind of continue to draft, I think, until we see some sort of physical decline from him.
Yeah, I think and I was definitely a part of this. The narrative on James Harden took on a life of its own, and we started to forget what kind of fantasy asset he can be. And you do have to be able to separate the two. And even as an NBA player, I mean, he was more positive than he was negative this year. So, we know what James Harden is as far as a playoff performer and a winning basketball player, yada, yada. But he's still really, really good at what he does. I'm seeing Damian Lillard as the 13th pick in the 2nd round is interesting. So it feels like there was some buyer's remorse with Damian Lillard.
Understandably so. Yeah, I think he's going to be a really interesting case, as we get into real drafts in a few months.
You got Brunson the next pick. Love that. I love that. Feels like a complete snipe from you.
I agree. And, I mean, the appeal with Lillard from a, fantasy category league perspective is high volume threes, right? It's all right, he's just going to be one rung below Steph Curry. He's going to shoot 90% from the line on high volume. And it's if those things aren't there and he's also shooting 41% from the field, he becomes a significantly worse fantasy player. So I think he was being drafted, more so on his value from this past year, which much like James Harden, he's one of those guys who's at that age where you wonder how much of a bounce back is coming. And it feels like he, by default, will probably play better than he did last year, but I don't know that it'll be a massive rebound. And, you look at the players who went before him and it's all right, how many of those guys are you definitively saying, I can't believe you took him over Damian Lillard, right? Here's the 2nd round starting at pick 15. Sabonis, Booker, Kawhi, Fox, Embiid went in the 2nd round. That was a weird one. LeBron, Maxey, DeJounte, Steph Curry went 2-9. Paul George, Alperen Sengun, Trae Young, and then Damian Lillard.
I'd rather have all those players.
What?
I would rather have all of those players.
Murray's an interesting one to me. There's just so much unknown. Is he even with the Hawks? Is Trae Young with the Hawks? I mean, they have the number 1 pick all of a sudden. So the Hawks to me are kind of a TBD type of team.
Right.
But Kawhi early in round 2 is interesting. I would not take him there. I'll say that. I think we got almost a best case health season from Kawhi in the regular season. I don't know that repeats next year.
Yeah. Okay. I think I'm with you on Kawhi. Kawhi, I would probably wait on. But yeah, that 2nd round is going to be interesting because there's a lot of great players with giant question marks, and I feel like teams are going to be made or broken based on how good their 2nd round pick is. Round 1 is so solid. The Jokic and Doncic and Wemby and Tatum and and Ant, and I mean, it just feels like you kind of know exactly what you're going to get. Once you get into round 2, it's like, I don't know. I think in just looking at this, I am really going to prioritize safety in round 2 and then swing for the fences in other areas, because it feels like those players,
Yeah.
there are some danger zones in that range that can really tank your season.
Yeah, I think that's where the minefield really is. Like, there's so much reliable, high level talent in the NBA right now that in round 1 you're not really forced to take a risk that you don't want to. Like Anthony Davis, for example, he's always going to be a risky player to me. Yeah, you're never going to feel great about Anthony Davis's health prospects, but the last 2 years have been solid for him. But yeah, round 2 is where you just kind of have to start picking your poison. Where it's like, I would rather have Tyrese Maxey than LeBron or Kawhi. Even though those guys have maybe higher per game ceilings than Tyrese Maxey with a healthy Embiid, I want the dependability. I want the young legs. I want somebody who I think could play 75 games as opposed to 63. One more thing I wanted to point out is I liked a lot of the values late in round 6. So the beginning of round 6 was a little confusing to me. That's where you had like D'Angelo Russell, Zach LaVine, Keegan Murray, Brad Beal, Mark Williams, some pretty risky players at that point in the draft. But starting at the middle of round 6, Kuminga, Hero, Trey Murphy, OG Anunoby, Anthony Simons, Nick Claxton, Dante DiVincenzo. I thought that was a pretty nice run. I like all those guys next year.
Yeah, and it feels like we're talking about guys that are going to end up getting these enhanced roles. So maybe part of it is we haven't really seen it for a full season yet, but you're kind of buying in on the ground floor with some of these guys. I'm with you. I don't think like Jonathan Kuminga could be one of those guys we look at a year from now and say, "Oh my God, what a value he was on draft day." Anthony Simons, his best days are still in front of him. OG Anunoby is there, and the role that he's carved out for himself defensively with the New York Knicks, there's definitely some value to be had there. Trey Murphy would be another one that I like.
Yeah, if you're doing early drafts, like Murphy is somebody I would target, because I think the Pels are shaking things up at some level this offseason. And I think part of the reason for that is they feel like they need to find ways to get Trey Murphy more involved. And he's been involved the last couple of years, but it's been because one of Ingram or Zion is always banged up, right? And I think if they were to move on from Ingram, for example, I think that would open up Trey Murphy for a huge season, like a potential most improved player type of year for Murphy. So if you're doing early drafts, if you're finding a site that does best balls after the finals, that is absolutely somebody I would target a bit later in drafts. But we got to wrap this thing up. Brandon, good stuff. As always, man, go check out Brandon's prize picks, full breakdowns over on RotoWire's Twitter account, RotoWire NBA account. We'll find those throughout the postseason every night that we have games. Cleveland, Boston, Dallas, OKC tonight. Enjoy those, Brandon. We'll talk next Wednesday.
Bye, guys.